The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on Delilah Hayes, as tears streamed down her dust-stained face, the broken axle of her wagon jutting out like a fractured bone, leaving her stranded in the vast emptiness of the Arizona Territory in the summer of 1878. The journey west had already taken everything from her parents to cholera back in Missouri, her meager savings to the wagon and supplies, and now even her transportation lay in ruins on this desolate stretch of trail. Delilah brushed a stray strand of auburn hair from her face, her once neat bun now coming undone after hours of futile attempts to repair the wagon. Her hands were raw and blistered, her blue calico dress torn at the hem and covered in red dust. The 2 oxen that had pulled her wagon stood patiently nearby, tethered to a scraggly mesquite tree, occasionally snorting in the oppressive heat. "What am I to do now?" she whispered to no one, her voice raspy from thirst. The water barrel in her wagon was running dangerously low, and Green Valley was still at least 3 days' journey away on a functioning wagon. On foot, with limited supplies. Impossible. The distant sound of hoofbeats made Delilah freeze. In these parts, riders could mean many things, few of them good for a woman alone. Hastily, she wiped her tears and stood, smoothing her dress as best she could. Her father's old revolver lay wrapped in a cloth inside the wagon, but she'd never had to use it. She prayed she wouldn't need to now. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, growing larger by the second. Squinting against the sun, Delilah made out a single rider approaching at a steady pace. As he drew nearer, she could see he sat tall in his saddle, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. A cowboy, by the looks of him, with a red bandana around his neck and worn leather chaps over his denim pants. The rider slowed his horse as he approached, and Delilah stood her ground, though her heart hammered in her chest. He pulled his horse to a stop about 10 feet from her, and she got her first clear look at him. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 25 or so, with a strong jaw darkened by several days' worth of stubble. His eyes, a startling shade of green, assessed the situation quickly before returning to her face. "Afternoon, madam," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep but gentle. "Seems you've had yourself some trouble." "The axle broke," Delilah replied, gesturing helplessly toward the wagon. "About 3 hours ago." The cowboy nodded, dismounting with fluid grace. He patted his horse's neck before approaching the wagon, keeping a respectful distance from Delilah. "Samuel Kincaid," he introduced himself. "Most folks call me Sam." "Delilah Hayes," she responded, watching warily as he circled around to inspect the damage. Sam knelt beside the broken axle, whistling low. "That's a clean break. No fixing that out here without proper tools and a new piece of hardwood." He looked up at her. "You heading to Green Valley?" Delilah nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" "Not much else in this direction," he said with a slight smile. "I've got a small ranch about a day's ride from here. Was heading back from delivering some cattle to Fort Huachuca." He stood, dusting off his hands on his chaps. "You traveling alone, Miss Hayes?" The question made her stiffen. It wasn't wise to admit such vulnerability, but her situation was obvious enough. "Yes, my parents. They didn't make it past Missouri." Something in Sam's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that." He glanced at the sky, then back at the wagon. "Sun's going to set in a few hours. You can't stay out here alone, and that wagon isn't going anywhere." He seemed to make a decision then, squaring his shoulders. "I can offer you a ride to my ranch. We can send word to Green Valley. See about getting your wagon retrieved and repaired." Delilah hesitated. Going anywhere with a strange man was precisely what her mother had warned against, but dying of thirst in the desert seemed the likelier danger at present. As if reading her thoughts, Sam added, My foreman's wife, Martha, lives at the ranch. She's a good woman, keeps us all in line. You'd be perfectly safe, Miss Hayes. I give you my word." Delilah studied him carefully. There was something reassuring in those green eyes, an honesty that seemed rare in these parts. "What about my belongings?" "Everything I own is in that wagon." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "We'll take what you need for a few days. I'll ride back with some men tomorrow to guard your wagon until we can transport it properly." He gestured to his horse, a handsome chestnut gelding with a white blaze. "Thunder here is strong enough to carry us both to the ranch if we don't push him too hard." The prospect of abandoning her wagon, even temporarily, made Delilah's chest tighten with anxiety. But what choice did she have? She nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Kincaid, I accept your offer." Relief flashed across Sam's face. "Good decision, Miss Hayes." He moved toward the wagon. "Let's gather what you'll need for a few days." With Sam's help, Delilah collected her most essential items: a small carpet bag with clothing, her father's revolver, a locket containing miniature portraits of her parents, and a few personal treasures. They secured the wagon as best they could, covering it with the canvas top and tying it down tightly. The matter of the oxen was solved when Sam suggested untethering them and letting them follow behind, apparently a common practice with well-trained animals. "They'll follow Thunder," he explained. "Cattle and oxen tend to do that, especially when they've nowhere else to go." When all was ready, Sam approached with Thunder. "Ever ridden astride, Miss Hayes?" Delilah blushed slightly. "No, always side saddle when I rode at all." Sam nodded, not seeming surprised. "You'll ride in front. It's safer that way, and I can make sure you don't fall." He offered his cupped hands to give her a boost. "Your dress might get a bit compromised," he added apologetically. Gathering her courage and what remained of her dignity, Delilah placed her boot in his hands and felt herself lifted effortlessly into the saddle. Her skirts rode up to her ankles, and she quickly tried to arrange them for modesty, though it was a losing battle. Sam mounted behind her with practiced ease, reaching around her to take the reins. "Comfortable?" he asked, his voice close to her ear. She wasn't, not with a stranger's chest pressed against her back, but she nodded anyway. "As much as can be expected, Mr. Kincaid." "Call me Sam," he said, clicking his tongue to set Thunder in motion. "We've got about 4 hours of riding ahead of us. No need to stand on formality when you're sharing a saddle." As they rode away from her broken wagon, Delilah couldn't help but look back at the pathetic sight. It represented all her hopes for a new life in Green Valley, where her mother's sister owned a small millinery shop and had offered her a position. Now those plans hung in the balance, dependent on the goodwill of a cowboy she'd just met. The rhythm of the horse beneath them and the warm body behind her lulled Delilah into a strange sense of security as they made their way across the rugged landscape. The afternoon sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. "May I ask what takes you to Green Valley alone, Miss Hayes?" Sam's voice broke the silence after they'd been riding for nearly an hour. Delilah considered how much to share. "My aunt lives there. She owns a hat shop and offered me work after my parents passed. I sold our farm in Missouri to finance the journey." Sam made a sound of understanding. "A long way to travel on your own. You're braver than most men I know." "Not brave," Delilah countered, "just without options." They fell into conversation as they rode, the initial awkwardness gradually dissolving. Sam told her about his ranch, the Double K, which he'd built from practically nothing over the past 5 years. He'd come west from Pennsylvania after the war, worked as a ranch hand until he saved enough to buy his own small plot, and slowly expanded through hard work and smart cattle trading. "It's not much compared to some spreads," he admitted, "but it's mine." 2,500 acres, about 300 head of cattle, and enough good men working for me to keep it all running smooth." "You've accomplished a great deal for someone so young," Delilah observed. "I'm 28, he replied. "Started when I was 23. The war made a lot of us grow up fast." The mention of the war, which had ended 13 years ago, reminded Delilah that this man had likely seen and done things she couldn't imagine. She was only 20 herself, having been just a child during those terrible years. As the sun began to set, the temperature dropped rapidly, as it often did in the desert. Delilah shivered, and without comment, Sam reached around to untie his bedroll from behind the saddle. Somehow, while keeping control of the horse with one hand, he managed to unfurl a woolen blanket and wrap it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured, touched by the simple kindness. "Can't have you catching cold," he replied matter-of-factly. "Martha would never forgive me." The mention of Martha reassured Delilah again. A ranch with a respectable woman present seemed less threatening than she had initially feared. As darkness fell completely, the stars emerged in breathtaking profusion, more than Delilah had ever seen back east. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light, and she couldn't help but gasp at its beauty. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Sam said, his voice soft with appreciation. "That's one thing I never tire of out here. The stars seem close enough to touch." Just when Delilah thought her legs couldn't take any more riding, lights appeared in the distance. "Is that your ranch?" she asked hopefully. "Yes, madam, the Double K. Not much to look at, but it's home." As they drew closer, Delilah made out several buildings: a main house built of adobe with a wooden porch, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Lantern light glowed from a few windows, and as they approached, a dog started barking, soon joined by several others. "Those mutts would sleep through an Apache raid, but they never miss a horse coming in," Sam commented with a chuckle. He guided Thunder toward the main house, where the door opened to reveal a stout woman with gray streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Sam Kincaid." "You're late enough to worry a body half to death," the woman called out, her hands on her hips. Then she noticed Delilah. "And who might this be?" Sam dismounted first, then reached up to help Delilah down. Her legs nearly buckled after so long in the saddle, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Martha, this is Miss Delilah Hayes. Her wagon broke an axle about 15 miles east. She was heading to Green Valley." Sam kept his hand on Delilah's arm as he made the introduction. "Miss Hayes, this is Martha Fleming, my foreman's wife and the woman who keeps this ranch from falling into complete chaos." Martha's expression immediately softened. "Oh, you poor dear. Out in that desert with a broken wagon. You must be exhausted and half-starved." She shot Sam a look. "And this one made you ride double all the way here, I expect." "It was the only option, Martha," Sam defended himself. "I couldn't leave her there and we couldn't fix the wagon." Martha waved him off. "Well, you did the right thing bringing her here, I'll grant you that. Now get inside, both of you. I've kept supper warm and there's plenty." The inside of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, clean, well furnished, with colorful woven rugs on the adobe floors and good quality furniture that must have been transported at great expense from back east. A large fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with a fire burning low to ward off the evening chill. "Frank's already turned in," Martha explained, referring to her husband, the foreman. "He was out since dawn dealing with that broken fence line in the south pasture." She guided Delilah to a chair at the large wooden dining table. "Sit, sit. I'll fetch you both some food." Too tired to protest, Delilah sank gratefully into the chair. Sam disappeared briefly to wash up, returning with his face clean and his hair damp and combed back. He'd removed his chaps and gun belt. looking somewhat more civilized in just his denim pants and blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. Martha brought out plates of beans, cornbread, and sliced roast beef that made Delilah's mouth water. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. They ate mostly in silence, both too tired and hungry for much conversation, while Martha bustled about, occasionally interjecting with questions or comments. When they'd finished, Martha showed Delilah to a small but neat bedroom. "It's not much, but it's clean," she said, placing a ceramic pitcher and basin on the dresser. "There's water for washing up, and I've put a nightgown on the bed. It might be a bit large, belonged to Sam's sister when she visited last year, but it'll do for sleeping." "Sam has a sister?" Delilah asked, surprised. "Yes, Rebecca. Lives in Denver with her husband, visits when she can." Martha patted the bed. "We'll wash your clothes tomorrow. You get some rest now. You're safe here." Left alone, Delilah took advantage of the water to wash the dust from her face and hands. The borrowed nightgown was indeed too large, but it was made of soft cotton and smelled of lavender. As she climbed into the bed, exhaustion overtook her, and she fell asleep almost instantly. The crowing of a rooster woke Delilah the next morning. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing her surroundings. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up, noting with surprise that her carpet bag had been placed beside the dresser. Sam must have brought it in while she slept. A knock at the door preceded Martha's cheerful voice. "Miss Hayes, are you awake? Breakfast is nearly ready." "Yes, thank you," Delilah called back. "I'll be out shortly." After dressing in a fresh dress from her bag, a simple brown cotton with white trim, Delilah made her way to the main room. The house looked different in daylight, larger and airier than it had seemed last night. Sam was already at the table, talking with an older man who must be Frank Fleming, the foreman. Both men stood when Delilah entered. "Good morning, Miss Hayes," Sam said, pulling out a chair for her. "I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, taking the offered seat. "And please call me Delilah." Sam smiled, and Delilah noticed for the first time the small crinkles around his eyes when he did so. "Delilah, then. This is Frank Fleming, my foreman." Frank nodded respectfully. "Miss Hayes, Sam told me about your predicament. Don't you worry about your wagon. We'll ride out after breakfast with a couple of the boys and bring it back here for repairs." "That's very kind," Delilah said gratefully. "I don't know how I'll repay such generosity." "Nonsense," Martha interjected, placing a platter of flapjacks on the table. "Any decent folk would do the same. Now eat up, all of you. It's going to be a long day." After breakfast, Sam, Frank, and two ranch hands prepared to ride out to retrieve Delilah's wagon. Sam assured her they would bring back all her belongings safely, and that they'd assess the damage to determine how quickly repairs could be made. "What will I do in the meantime?" Delilah asked, suddenly feeling very much in the way. "You'll help me, of course," Martha answered before Sam could respond. "I've been wanting to put up preserves from that peach tree out back, and an extra pair of hands will make the work go faster." Sam looked relieved at Martha's intervention. "You'll be in good hands with Martha. We should be back by sundown, weather permitting." As the men rode off, Delilah found herself swept into Martha's energetic routine. The older woman was a dynamo of activity, and Delilah soon found herself peeling and slicing peaches, sterilizing jars, and stirring boiling pots of fruit and sugar. "So," Martha said casually as they worked, "you were heading to Green Valley alone. That takes courage, girl." Delilah explained her situation: the loss of her parents, her aunt's offer, the sale of the family farm. Martha listened sympathetically, offering occasional noises of understanding or outrage at appropriate moments. "Life's dealt you some hard blows for one so young," she observed when Delilah finished. "But you seem to have a strong spirit. That'll serve you well out here." "I hope so," Delilah replied, wiping perspiration from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Though I admit, yesterday when my wagon broke down, I felt anything but strong. If Mr. Kincaid Sam hadn't come along." Martha nodded knowingly. "The good Lord works in mysterious ways, sending the right people when we need them most." She paused in her work, giving Delilah a considering look. "Sam's a good man, you know. One of the best I've ever known. Works harder than two men, treats his hands fair, and never goes back on his word." Delilah wasn't quite sure how to respond to this apparent endorsement. "He seems very kind," she managed. Martha snorted softly. "Kind doesn't begin to cover it. That boy's been through hell and come out decent on the other side. Not many can say the same." Curiosity piqued. Delilah couldn't help asking, "What happened to him?" Martha sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's not my story to tell in full, but he lost his entire family in the war. Parents, younger brother. Was just a boy himself when he enlisted. Came west afterward with nothing but nightmares and determination." She shook her head. "Worked himself half to death building this place. Never complains, never takes a day off, never thinks of himself first." "He's not married?" Delilah asked, immediately regretting the question when Martha gave her a knowing look. "No, though not for lack of opportunities. There's more than a few young ladies in town who have set their caps for him." Martha turned back to the stove. "He says he's too busy for courting, but I think he's just waiting for the right woman, someone who sees him for who he is, not what he has." They worked in comfortable silence for a while after that, Delilah's mind turning over this new information about her rescuer. By mid-afternoon they had produced 24 jars of peach preserves, their sweet aroma filling the kitchen. "Now then," Martha said, surveying their handiwork with satisfaction, "let's get cleaned up. I need to start supper, and you look like you could use a rest. Why don't you take a book from the shelf in the parlor and sit on the porch for a while? The afternoon light is perfect for reading." Grateful for the suggestion, Delilah selected a volume of Tennyson's poetry and settled into a rocking chair on the shaded porch. The view from the Double K was breathtaking, rolling grasslands stretching to distant mountains, with cattle grazing peacefully in the middle distance. A gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and sun-warmed earth, and despite her uncertain circumstances, Delilah felt a surprising sense of peace. She had dozed off in the chair when the sound of approaching horses woke her. The sun was lower in the sky now, but it was still several hours before sunset. Shading her eyes, Delilah made out 4 riders approaching Sam and his men, returning earlier than expected. As they drew closer, she could see her wagon being pulled behind them, the oxen tethered to it as before. Relief washed over her at the sight of her belongings safe and sound. She stood, smoothing her dress and adjusting her hair, suddenly self-conscious as Sam dismounted and approached the porch. "You managed to retrieve it," she said, stating the obvious in her nervousness. Sam nodded, removing his hat as he climbed the porch steps. "It wasn't as bad as I feared. The axle's broken clean, but we can replace it. Frank thinks we can have it repaired in about 3 days. 3 days, Delilah repeated, uncertain how to feel about this news. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Sam assured her. "We've plenty of room, and Martha seems pleased to have another woman around." He hesitated, then added, "Unless you're eager to get to Green Valley. I could arrange to have someone take you there while we work on the wagon." "No," Delilah said quickly, then blushed at her own eagerness. "That is, if it's truly no trouble, I'd prefer to stay with my wagon. All I own is in there." Sam's expression relaxed. "Good, I mean, that makes sense." He cleared his throat. I've sent one of the boys to Green Valley with a message for your aunt, letting her know you're safe and explaining the delay. The thoughtfulness of this gesture touched Delilah deeply. Thank you. I hadn't even thought. She'll be worried when I don't arrive as scheduled. I figured as much, Sam said with a small smile. The boy should be back tomorrow with any reply. That evening, dinner was a livelier affair with the addition of Frank and two of the ranch hands who'd helped retrieve the wagon. Martha had outdone herself with a meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh greens from her kitchen garden. The men regaled Delilah with tales of ranch life, carefully edited, she suspected, for her feminine sensibilities. After dinner, Sam suggested a short walk to settle their meal. I'd like to show you around a bit if you're not too tired, he offered. With Martha's encouraging nod, Delilah accepted. They strolled around the ranch buildings as the day's last light painted the western sky in spectacular hues of pink and gold. Sam pointed out various features of his operation with understated pride: the new barn he'd built last year, the corral where they broke horses, the spring-fed pond that ensured water even in the driest seasons. You've built something remarkable here, Delilah observed as they paused beside the pond. A family of ducks swam peacefully across its surface, leaving rippling trails behind them. Sam shrugged, but she could tell he was pleased by the compliment. It's still a work in progress. Every year I try to improve something, add something new. Is it lonely? The question slipped out before Delilah could consider its propriety. If Sam was surprised by her directness, he didn't show it. Sometimes, he admitted. The men are good company and Martha and Frank are like family. But it's not the same as. He trailed off, looking toward the distant mountains. As having a family of your own, Delilah finished for him. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. I always thought there'd be time for that later once I got the ranch established. But the years pass quickly out here. They stood in companionable silence as twilight deepened around them. Delilah was acutely aware of Sam's presence beside her, his height, the clean scent of soap that had replaced the dust and sweat of the trail, the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. A strange tension hummed between them, neither uncomfortable nor unwelcome. We should head back, Sam finally said, his voice low. It gets dark quickly out here. As they walked back to the house, their hands brushed accidentally, sending an unexpected thrill up Delilah's arm. She pulled away slightly, confused by her reaction to this man she barely knew. Martha had lit the lamps in the main room and was setting up a checkerboard on a small table. Ah, there you are. I thought perhaps you might enjoy a game before turning in, she said cheerfully. Unless you're too tired, Delilah. Not at all, Delilah replied, grateful for the distraction. Though I should warn you, I was considered quite good back home. Sam grinned. Is that a challenge, Miss Hayes? And so they spent the evening playing checkers, with Martha occasionally offering unsolicited advice to both players while she mended a pile of socks. Delilah won the first game, Sam the second, leading to a decisive third match that had them both leaning intently over the board, strategizing their moves with mock seriousness. When Delilah finally captured Sam's last piece with a triumphant "King me," Martha declared it was high time for respectable folks to be in bed, effectively ending the competition with Delilah as the victor. I demand a rematch tomorrow, Sam insisted good-naturedly as they put away the game. I accept, Delilah replied with a smile. Though the outcome is likely to be the same. We'll see about that, he countered, his green eyes warm with amusement. That night, as Delilah prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the strange turns her journey had taken. 2 days ago, she'd been alone and desperate beside a broken wagon. Now she was comfortable, safe, and most surprisingly enjoying herself in the home of a man she'd just met. Life in the West was certainly unpredictable. The next morning brought a flurry of activity to the Double K. It was cattle branding day, a task that apparently couldn't be postponed despite Delilah's presence. Sam apologized for having to attend to ranch business, but Delilah assured him she understood. "Martha has already drafted me to help with making pies for the men's lunch," she told him as he prepared to leave after breakfast. "Apparently branding works up quite an appetite," Sam laughed. "That it does. We'll be back around noon, hungry as wolves." From the kitchen window, Delilah watched him stride toward the corral where the other men were gathering. There was something compelling about the way he moved, confident but not cocky, strong but not intimidating. He wore his authority naturally, she observed, as the men unconsciously deferred to him despite some being older by decades. "He cuts a fine figure, doesn't he?" Martha commented, catching Delilah's gaze. Delilah jumped slightly, embarrassed to be caught staring. "I was just observing how he interacts with his men." "MMHMM," Martha hummed skeptically, handing Delilah a bowl of peeled apples to slice. "And I'm the Queen of England. Now those apples won't slice themselves." By noon, they had prepared 6 large pies, apple, peach, and berry, and a huge pot of beans to feed the hungry ranch hands. The men returned in high spirits, the morning's work having gone smoothly. They washed up at the pump outside before filing into the house, where tables had been set up to accommodate them all. Sam took a seat beside Delilah, his face flushed from the morning's exertion, smelling of leather, horses, and honest sweat. "The pies smell wonderful," he said appreciatively. "Did you make them?" "Martha did most of the work," Delilah admitted. "I just helped with the preparation." "She's being modest," Martha interjected, passing a platter of cornbread. "She has a natural touch with pastry. That apple pie was all her doing." Sam grinned. "Then I'll have to have a large slice of that one." The meal was boisterous, with men shouting conversations across the table and generous helpings of food being passed around. Delilah found herself enjoying the lively atmosphere, so different from the subdued, proper meals of her childhood. By the time everyone had eaten their fill, including second helpings of pie, it was mid-afternoon. As the men returned to work, Sam lingered. "I've got to finish with the branding," he told Delilah, "but I was thinking, if you'd like, we could ride out to the North Ridge before sunset. There's a view from there that's worth seeing." The invitation sent a flutter through Delilah's chest. "I'd like that," she said sincerely. "Good," Sam replied, looking pleased. "I'll have Thunder saddled for you around 5. We'll take separate mounts this time," he added with a slight smile. "More comfortable for both of us." As he walked away, Martha appeared at Delilah's elbow. "Well now, a sunset ride to the North Ridge. That's interesting." "What's interesting about it?" Delilah asked innocently. Martha's knowing look was back. "Sam doesn't take just anyone up there. It's a special place to him. His thinking spot, he calls it." She began gathering dirty plates. "You'll need to change before you go. That brown dress won't do for riding." "I don't have riding clothes," Delilah protested. "Rebecca left some things behind last visit." "I think they'll fit you well enough. Come along." An hour later, Delilah examined herself in the small mirror in her room. The borrowed riding skirt was a deep green that complemented her auburn hair, and the white blouse, while slightly loose, could be tucked in neatly. Martha had found a matching jacket as well, against the evening chill. "You'll do," Martha pronounced, making a final adjustment to Delilah's hair, which she'd insisted on arranging in a practical but flattering style. "Remember to sit straight in the saddle. Sam appreciates good horsemanship." "Martha," Delilah began hesitantly, "are you? That is, do you think?" The older woman patted her cheek affectionately. I think you're a lovely young woman who's been through a difficult time, and Sam is a good man who deserves some happiness. Beyond that, well, life has its own way of sorting things out. When Delilah emerged from the house at 5 o'clock, Sam was waiting with two saddled horses, Thunder for her, and a sleek black stallion for himself. He stared at her for a moment before remembering his manners. "You look very nice," he said, the compliment seeming inadequate for the look in his eyes. "Thank you," Delilah replied, suddenly shy. "Martha found these clothes. They belong to your sister." "They suit you," Sam said simply, then offered his cupped hands to help her mount. Once they were both in their saddles, Sam led the way from the ranch, heading north at an easy pace that allowed them to ride side by side where the trail permitted. Thunder seemed to recognize Delilah, responding readily to her commands despite their brief acquaintance. "You ride well," Sam observed after they'd gone a mile or so. "We had horses on our farm in Missouri," Delilah explained. "Nothing as fine as Thunder, but I learned the basics from my father." "Your father taught you well," Sam replied. "Most ladies I know ride side saddle and need help with every little thing." "I'm not most ladies," Delilah said, then immediately wondered if she'd spoken too boldly, but Sam just smiled. "No, you certainly are not, Delilah Hayes." The terrain grew more rugged as they continued north, with juniper trees dotting the landscape and rock formations rising from the earth like ancient sculptures. After about 40 minutes of riding, they reached the base of a ridge that rose steeply from the surrounding plain. "We'll have to go the rest of the way on foot," Sam explained, dismounting and securing his horse to a stunted oak. He came to help Delilah down, his hands strong and sure on her waist. For a moment after her feet touched the ground, he didn't let go, and Delilah found herself looking up into those remarkable green eyes, now darkened with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "It's not far to the top. The trail is a bit steep in places, but the view is worth it." The climb took about 15 minutes, with Sam occasionally offering his hand to help Delilah over the rougher sections. When they reached the summit, Delilah's breath caught in her throat. The ridge overlooked a vast panorama of the Arizona landscape, rolling grasslands, dramatic rock formations, and distant mountains turned purple in the late afternoon light. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land, giving everything a golden glow. "It's beautiful," she whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might somehow diminish the majesty spread before them. "This is my favorite place on the ranch," Sam said, his voice equally soft. "I come up here to think, to remind myself why all the hard work matters." They stood in silence for a while, absorbing the view as the sun sank lower. A cool breeze stirred Delilah's hair, and she was grateful for the jacket Martha had insisted she bring. "Are you cold?" Sam asked, noticing her slight shiver. "A little," she admitted. Without hesitation, he moved behind her, sheltering her from the wind with his body. The gesture was protective rather than presumptuous, but Delilah was acutely aware of his closeness, of the warmth radiating from him. "Better?" he asked, his voice close to her ear. "Yes," she replied, surprised by how breathless she sounded. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink, Sam spoke again. "When I first came west, I was lost, not just physically but inside. The war took something from me I thought I'd never get back." He paused, and Delilah remained perfectly still, sensing the importance of what he was sharing. "The first time I saw a sunset like this, I felt something stir inside me, a kind of hope. That beauty like this could still exist in a world that had seen such ugliness." Delilah turned slightly, looking up at him. His face was lined with remembered pain, but there was strength there too, a hard-won resilience. Without thinking, she reached up to touch his cheek gently. "You found your way." His eyes met hers, intense and searching. "I'm still finding it," he said softly. For a breathless moment, Delilah thought he might kiss her. Part of her, a surprising, bold part she hardly recognized, wanted him to. But Sam stepped back slightly, breaking the spell. "We should head back," he said, his voice rough. "It'll be dark soon." The ride back to the ranch was mostly silent, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. Something had shifted between them on that ridge, and understanding had been reached, unspoken but real nonetheless. As they approached the ranch, now lit with welcoming lantern light, Sam finally spoke. "Thank you for coming with me today." "Thank you for showing me your special place," Delilah replied sincerely. He smiled, the tension of earlier seemingly dissolved. "Perhaps tomorrow we could go for another ride. There's a small lake about an hour's ride west that's quite pretty." "I'd like that," Delilah said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. Martha greeted them at the house with knowing eyes but made no comment beyond asking if they'd enjoyed the view. Dinner was a quieter affair than lunch, with just the four of them: Sam, Delilah, Martha, and Frank. Afterward, true to his word, Sam challenged Delilah to a rematch at checkers, which ended in another victory for Delilah. "You're too predictable," she teased him as she captured his last piece. "Always going for the bold move instead of the patient one." "Story of my life," Sam admitted with a rueful grin. "Patience has never been my strong suit." The next morning brought a surprise. The ranch hand who'd been sent to Green Valley returned with a letter from Delilah's aunt. She tore it open eagerly at the breakfast table, scanning the contents quickly. "Is everything all right?" Sam asked, noting her furrowed brow. "Yes and no," Delilah replied, looking up from the letter. "My aunt is relieved to know I'm safe, but she writes that she's fallen ill. Nothing serious, she assures me, but she's confined to bed for at least a week on doctor's orders. She suggests I delay my arrival until she's recovered." "Well then," Martha said briskly, "it seems the Lord has decided you'll be our guest a while longer. That works out nicely, as Frank tells me the wagon repairs may take longer than expected. The wood for the new axle needs to season properly." Sam's expression was carefully neutral, but Delilah thought she detected a flicker of pleasure in his eyes at the news of her extended stay. The day unfolded with a natural rhythm. Delilah helped Martha with household tasks in the morning, learning more about the practical aspects of running a ranch home. In the afternoon, Sam made good on his promise to show her the lake, a peaceful body of water nestled in a small valley where waterfowl gathered in surprising numbers. They dismounted to walk along the shore, and Sam picked up flat stones to skip across the water's surface. Delilah tried her hand at it, failing miserably at first but improving with Sam's patient instruction, his hand guiding hers as he demonstrated the proper wrist motion for throwing. "There you go," he exclaimed as one of her stones skipped 4 times before sinking. "You're a natural." "Hardly," Delilah laughed, "but thank you for the flattery." They sat on a fallen log near the water's edge, enjoying the peaceful setting and each other's company. Conversation flowed easily between them now, covering everything from books they'd read to dreams they'd harbored as children. "I wanted to be a ship's captain," Sam confessed with a laugh. Ironic for a boy who grew up in landlocked Pennsylvania and ended up in the Arizona Territory. "I wanted to be a teacher," Delilah shared in return. "I even started training at a women's seminary before my mother fell ill and I had to return home." "You'd make a fine teacher," Sam said thoughtfully. "Patient, intelligent, good with explanations, all the qualities my school teachers lacked." Delilah smiled at the compliment. "Perhaps someday. Green Valley has a small school from what my aunt tells me. Once I'm settled, I might inquire about positions." A shadow seemed to cross Sam's face at the mention of Green Valley, but it passed so quickly Delilah wondered if she'd imagined it. They rode back to the ranch as the afternoon waned, arriving just as Martha rang the dinner bell. The days that followed established a pleasant pattern. Delilah helped Martha with household tasks in the mornings, while the afternoons were devoted to exploring the ranch with Sam. He showed her his favorite spots: a hidden spring surrounded by wildflowers, an ancient cottonwood tree that provided shade for cattle in the summer heat, a small canyon where the acoustics made even a whisper echo impressively. Each evening they would play checkers or read aloud from Sam's small but respectable library, occasionally joined by Frank for card games that had them all laughing until their sides ached. Delilah found herself looking forward to these quiet evenings as much as the afternoon excursions. On the 5th day of her stay, Sam announced that he needed to ride into the nearest town, Carson's Crossing, about 2 hours away, for supplies. "Would you like to come along?" he asked Delilah over breakfast. "It's not much of a town, but it might be a nice change of scenery." "I'd love to," Delilah replied eagerly. After nearly a week at the ranch, the prospect of seeing a town, even a small one, was appealing. Martha insisted on packing them a lunch to eat on the journey, and by mid-morning they were on their way, riding side by side across the open country. The early June weather was perfect, warm but not yet oppressively hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. "Carson's Crossing isn't exactly civilization," Sam warned as they rode. "Just a trading post, saloon, small mercantile, blacksmith, and a handful of houses. But they make decent coffee at the trading post, and the mercantile sometimes gets fabrics and notions from back east." "It sounds charming," Delilah assured him. "After days on the trail alone, any town would seem like Paris to me." Sam laughed at that, the sound warming Delilah in a way the sunshine couldn't. She'd come to treasure his laugh over the past days. It transformed his face, softening the lines etched by hard work and harder memories. As they crested a hill, Sam suddenly reined in his horse, holding up a hand for Delilah to do the same. "Look there," he said quietly, pointing toward a stand of trees about 50 yards away. Delilah followed his gaze and gasped softly. A family of deer, a buck with an impressive rack of antlers, 2 does, and a spotted fawn grazed peacefully in the dappled shade. For several minutes they watched the scene in reverent silence until the buck raised his head, catching their scent, and led his family deeper into the trees. "That's good luck," Sam said as they resumed riding. "The old-timers say seeing a deer family means prosperity is coming." "Do you believe in such omens?" Delilah asked curiously. Sam considered the question. "Not exactly, but I do think there's more to this world than what we can explain. Sometimes things happen that seem like guidance or reassurance." He glanced at her. "Like finding you beside that broken wagon." The simple statement made Delilah's heart flutter. "I'm certainly grateful for whatever force led you to me that day," she replied softly. They reached Carson's Crossing just before noon. As Sam had warned, it was hardly a metropolis, just a cluster of buildings along a single dirt street, with hitching posts out front of most establishments. Still, after days of seeing only the ranch and open country, it seemed bustling to Delilah. They stopped first at the trading post, where Sam introduced Delilah to the proprietor, a grizzled man named Hank who greeted Sam like an old friend. "And who might this lovely lady be?" he asked, eyeing Delilah with frank curiosity. "Miss Delilah Hayes," Sam replied. "She's staying at the Double K while her wagon is being repaired. Miss Hayes, this is Hank Morgan, purveyor of the finest coffee west of the Mississippi, or so he claims." "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Hayes," Hank said, tipping his hat. "Any friend of Sam's is welcome here." Coffee's fresh, and I've got some of Mrs. Morgan's cinnamon rolls if you've a sweet tooth." After enjoying Hank's surprisingly good coffee and his wife's excellent cinnamon rolls, they moved on to the mercantile. The shop was small but well-stocked, with everything from tools and ammunition to fabrics and ready-made clothing. While Sam discussed his order with the shopkeeper, Delilah browsed the fabric selection. A bolt of blue cotton caught her eye, almost the exact shade of the Arizona sky at midday. She fingered it appreciatively, imagining a new dress made from the cheerful material. "You like that one?" Sam asked, appearing at her side. "It's lovely," Delilah admitted. "So vibrant." Sam nodded to the shopkeeper. "Add 5 yards of this to my order, please." "Oh no, I couldn't," Delilah protested. "Consider it compensation for all the help you've given Martha," Sam said firmly. "She tells me you've reorganized her entire pantry and taught her a new technique for preserving eggs." Delilah blushed. "That hardly merits such a gift." "Humor me," Sam said with a smile that melted her resistance. While the shopkeeper measured and cut the fabric, Sam and Delilah explored the rest of the store. Near the back, a display of books caught Delilah's attention. Most were practical manuals on farming, ranching, or home medicine, but a few novels were mixed in. Her eyes lit up at the sight of a copy of Jane Eyre. "You like that book?" Sam asked, noting her interest. "I've never read it," Delilah confessed, "but I've always wanted to. My mother mentioned it once as a favorite of hers." Without comment, Sam picked up the book and added it to his purchases. When Delilah started to object again, he held up a hand. "For the ranch library," he said innocently. "Martha enjoys a good novel in the evenings." Their final stop in town was the blacksmith, where Sam arranged for some specialized tools to be ordered from Tucson. The blacksmith, a massive man with arms like tree trunks, assured Sam the order would arrive within 2 weeks. As they prepared to leave town, Sam suggested they eat their lunch in a small grove of trees just outside the settlement. They spread Martha's picnic on a blanket in the dappled shade, cold chicken, corn bread, pickled vegetables, and apple turnovers for dessert. "Thank you for bringing me today," Delilah said as they ate. "It's been lovely to see something beyond the ranch, beautiful as it is." "I'm glad you came," Sam replied. "Makes a pleasant change to have company on these trips." He hesitated, then added, "I've enjoyed having you at the Double K these past days, Delilah, more than I can say." The sincerity in his voice made Delilah's cheeks warm. "I've enjoyed being there," she said truthfully. "Everyone has been so kind, especially you." Sam looked as though he wanted to say more, but instead he reached for an apple turnover. "Martha outdid herself with these," he commented, changing the subject. "She only makes them for special occasions usually." After they'd eaten, they packed up the remains of their lunch and mounted their horses for the journey home. They rode at a leisurely pace, in no hurry to end their day together. About halfway back to the ranch, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon. Sam frowned, watching their approach. "Looks like we might get caught in a storm," he observed. "They can blow up fast out here this time of year." Sure enough, within half an hour the sky had darkened ominously, and the wind picked up, bringing with it the scent of rain. Fat droplets began to fall, quickly increasing to a downpour. "There's a line shack about a quarter-mile east," Sam shouted over the rising wind. "We'd better wait it out there." They urged their horses to a faster pace, following a barely visible trail through the scrubby terrain. Soon, a small wooden structure appeared through the curtain of rain, a simple one-room cabin with a narrow porch. They dismounted quickly, securing the horses beneath a lean-to attached to the side of the shack before hurrying inside. The interior was spare but serviceable: a small iron stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow cot with blankets, and shelves stocked with basic provisions. "The men use this during roundup," Sam explained as he lit a lantern hanging from a ceiling beam. "We keep several of these shacks throughout the ranch, so no one has to ride back to the main house in bad weather or darkness." Delilah stood dripping on the plank floor, suddenly aware of how thoroughly soaked she was. Her riding skirt clung to her legs, and her blouse had become embarrassingly transparent. She crossed her arms over her chest, shivering slightly. Sam noticed her discomfort and immediately turned away, busying himself with lighting the stove. "There should be some dry clothes in that trunk," he said, indicating a wooden chest in the corner. "Nothing fancy, just work shirts and such, but better than staying wet." Grateful for his discretion, Delilah opened the trunk and found several flannel shirts, pants, and even a few pairs of wool socks. "Turn around, please," she requested, though Sam was already facing the stove, giving her privacy. She quickly stripped off her wet clothing, hanging it on a peg near the stove to dry, and donned one of the flannel shirts. It reached nearly to her knees, allowing her to maintain her modesty. "You can turn around now," she told Sam when she was decent. He had removed his own wet jacket but was still in his damp shirt. "You should change too," Delilah urged. "You'll catch cold otherwise." Sam nodded, grabbing a shirt from the trunk. This time Delilah turned her back, listening to the rustle of fabric as he changed. "All right," he said after a moment, and she turned to find him in a dry flannel shirt similar to the one she wore. The storm showed no sign of abating, if anything. It had intensified, with thunder now rolling across the sky and lightning illuminating the cabin's interior in brief, stark flashes. "Looks like we might be here a while," Sam observed, adding more wood to the stove. "Fortunately, there's coffee and some basic provisions. Are you hungry?" Delilah shook her head. "Just cold." Sam took a blanket from the cot and draped it around her shoulders. "Sit by the stove," he suggested. "I'll make us some coffee to warm up." While Sam busied himself with the coffee pot, Delilah settled into one of the chairs, drawing the blanket tightly around her. Despite the circumstances, there was something cozy about the small cabin, with the storm raging outside and the warm glow of the lantern and stove inside. Sam handed her a steaming cup of coffee a few minutes later, taking the other chair across from her. "Not as good as Hank's," he apologized, "but it'll warm you up." They sipped their coffee in companionable silence for a while, listening to the rain pounding on the roof and the occasional crack of thunder. The storm had brought an early darkness, making it feel much later than it actually was. "Do you think Martha will worry?" Delilah asked. Sam shook his head. "She knows I'd seek shelter in weather like this. She won't expect us back until it clears." Another comfortable silence fell between them. Delilah found herself studying Sam's face in the warm light, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny scar above his right eyebrow, the way his still damp hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He caught her looking and held her gaze, his green eyes reflecting the lantern light. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. Delilah considered deflecting the question but decided on honesty instead. "I was thinking how strange life can be. A week ago, I was alone with a broken wagon, certain my journey west was ending in disaster. Now I'm here with you and I can't remember the last time I felt so content." Sam's expression softened. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, sometimes for the worse, but sometimes—" He trailed off, still holding her gaze, "sometimes for much better than we could have imagined." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Delilah's heart began to race, and she clutched the coffee cup tighter to keep her hands from trembling. Sam set his own cup on the table and leaned forward slightly. "Delilah," he began, his voice rough with emotion, I know we've only known each other a short time, but I feel a particularly loud crack of thunder directly overhead interrupted him, making them both jump. The moment broken, Sam stood abruptly. I should check on the horses, he muttered, moving toward the door. Left alone in the cabin, Delilah took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing pulse. What had he been about to say? And more importantly, what would she have answered if he'd finished? Sam returned a few minutes later, rainwater dripping from his hair and shoulders. "Horses are fine," he reported, his earlier intensity carefully masked. "Storm's starting to move east, should clear within an hour or so." He busied himself adding more wood to the stove and refilling their coffee cups, maintaining a careful distance from Delilah. The easy intimacy of before had been replaced by a polite restraint that left her feeling oddly bereft. By the time the storm had passed, leaving only a gentle drizzle in its wake, their clothes were mostly dry. They changed back, taking turns to preserve propriety, and prepared to leave the shelter of the lined shack. "Thank you for the coffee and the dry clothes," Delilah said formally as they mounted their horses. Sam nodded, equally formal. "Glad the shack was nearby. Let's get back before Martha sends out a search party." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The land smelled fresh after the rain, and a rainbow arched across the eastern sky, but Delilah barely noticed the beauty around her. Her mind kept returning to that moment in the cabin, wondering what might have happened if the thunder hadn't interrupted. When they reached the Double K, Martha fussed over them, insisting they change into completely dry clothes and sit near the fire with mugs of hot cider. The normalcy of the ranch house helped dispel some of the strange tension that had developed in the lined shack. And by dinner time, Delilah and Sam were conversing normally again, albeit with a new awareness humming beneath the surface. That night, as Delilah prepared for bed, a soft knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Sam standing there, holding the copy of Jane Eyre he'd purchased in town. "I thought you might like to start reading this tonight," he said, offering her the book. "Since the rain has kept us all indoors and it's still early." Delilah accepted the book, her fingers brushing against his in the process. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful." Sam hesitated as if wanting to say more but merely nodded. "Sleep well, Delilah." "You too, Sam," she replied softly. After he'd gone, Delilah sat on her bed, holding the book against her chest. Something was changing between them, something both thrilling and frightening in its intensity. But what future could there be for them? She was bound for Green Valley as soon as her wagon was repaired. Her aunt was expecting her, had a position waiting for her in the millinery shop. Yet the thought of leaving the Double K, of leaving Sam, filled her with a sadness she hadn't anticipated when she'd first accepted his offer of help beside her broken wagon. Over the next few days, a subtle dance developed between them. On the surface, everything continued as before: daily rides around the ranch, evenings spent in shared activities with Martha and Frank, casual conversations at meals. But underneath ran currents of unspoken feelings, evident in lingering glances, accidental touches that perhaps weren't so accidental, and moments of charged silence that neither seemed willing to break. Martha watched it all with knowing eyes but said nothing, though Delilah occasionally caught the older woman smiling to herself when Sam offered to show Delilah yet another special place on the ranch. On the 8th day of Delilah's stay, Frank announced at breakfast that the wagon repairs were nearly complete. "Should be ready by tomorrow afternoon," he said, buttering a biscuit. "That new axle's solid as can be. She'll make it to Green Valley with no trouble." The news should have been welcome, but Delilah felt her heart sink. She looked up to find Sam watching her, his expression unreadable. "That's "Wonderful news," she managed, forcing a smile. "I'm very grateful for all the work you've done, Frank." "Think nothing of it," the foreman replied good-naturedly. "It's been nice having a pretty face around the place. Brightens things up." After breakfast, Sam suggested they ride to a spot they hadn't yet visited, a high mesa overlooking the eastern part of the ranch. "It's a bit of a climb," he warned, "but the view is worth it." The ride took them through some of the most beautiful parts of the Double K, across meadows bursting with wildflowers after the recent rain, and through stands of juniper and pinyon pine that released their spicy scent as the horses brushed past. They rode mostly in silence, each preoccupied with thoughts of the impending separation. When they reached the base of the mesa, they dismounted and secured their horses. The climb was indeed steep in places, requiring Sam to give Delilah a hand up over several rocky ledges. Each time their hands touched, Delilah felt that now familiar jolt of awareness, and each time Sam seemed reluctant to let go. The summit of the mesa was flat and grassy, with scattered boulders providing natural seating. The view stretched for miles in all directions. The Double K spread out below them to the west, and to the east, the trail that would lead Delilah to Green Valley. They sat on one of the larger boulders, side by side, gazing out at the panorama. After a long silence, Sam finally spoke. "Frank says your wagon will be ready tomorrow." "Yes," Delilah replied, unable to keep a note of regret from her voice. "Your aunt will be glad to see you," Sam continued, still looking out at the horizon rather than at her. "You must be eager to reach Green Valley after such a long journey." Delilah didn't answer immediately. A week ago she would have agreed without hesitation. Now she wasn't so sure. "I'm grateful for your hospitality," she said finally, "for everything you've done for me." Sam turned to look at her then, his green eyes intense. "Is that all it's been to you, Delilah? Hospitality?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. "No," she admitted softly, "it's been much more than that." Something in Sam's expression changed, a tension releasing. "Stay," he said simply. "What?" Delilah whispered, not sure she'd heard correctly. "Stay at the Double K," Sam clarified, taking her hand in his. "Don't go to Green Valley." Delilah stared at him, her heart pounding. "But my aunt, the position at her shop, my plans." "I know it's sudden," Sam acknowledged. "I know we've only known each other a short time, but I also know that when I found you beside that broken wagon, something changed for me." His grip on her hand tightened. "I wasn't looking for this, for you, but now I can't imagine watching you ride away tomorrow." "Sam," Delilah began, but he interrupted, suddenly urgent. "I'm not asking for promises, just time. Stay a while longer, see if what's growing between us might become something worth changing your plans for." His voice softened. "I think it could be, Delilah. I think it could be everything." Delilah felt tears welling in her eyes, overwhelmed by his words and by her own conflicting emotions. "I don't know what to say," she confessed. Sam reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "Say you'll think about it. That's all I ask for now." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Sam's relief was palpable. "Thank you," he said simply. Then, with exquisite gentleness, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was a brief kiss, tender and questioning, but it sent warmth flooding through Delilah's entire body. When Sam pulled back, his eyes searching hers for a reaction, she found herself leaning toward him again, answering his question without words. Their second kiss was deeper, a promise and an exploration, his hand coming up to cradle her face while hers rested against his chest, feeling the rapid beating of his heart beneath her palm. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the line shack," he admitted with a small smile. "The storm had terrible timing. Delilah agreed, surprising herself with her boldness. Sam laughed softly, the sound warming her more than the afternoon sun. It certainly did. They stayed on the mesa for a long time, talking more openly than they ever had before. Sam spoke of his hopes for the ranch, his dreams of expanding it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Delilah shared her own aspirations not just to work in her aunt's shop, but perhaps eventually to open a small school, to create a home of her own, to build a life that would have made her parents proud. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they reluctantly agreed it was time to head back to the ranch. The ride down the mesa and across the open country was different from the journey out lighter, filled with occasional laughter and casual touches. The tension between them transformed into something sweeter. When they returned to the ranch, Martha took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. "Dinner's almost ready," she said innocently. "Why don't you two wash up?" That evening, everything seemed imbued with special significance, the simple meal of Martha's beef stew and fresh bread. The way Sam's hand occasionally found Delilah's beneath the table, the comfortable conversation that flowed around them, including them, but also allowing them their private happiness. After dinner, Sam suggested a walk around the yard despite the cooling evening air. They strolled beneath a sky ablaze with stars, eventually stopping at the corral fence. Sam leaned against it, and Delilah stood beside him, looking up at the night sky. "Have you thought any more about what I asked?" Sam inquired, his voice quiet in the stillness. Delilah had been thinking of little else. "I have," she replied. "I need to go to Green Valley." Sam's face fell and he started to turn away, but Delilah caught his arm. "Let me finish," she said firmly. "I need to go to Green Valley to explain to my aunt in person why I won't be working at her shop after all." Hope rekindled in Sam's eyes. "And why is that?" "Because," Delilah said, her heart racing with the enormity of what she was about to commit to, "I've received a better offer. From a rancher who needs someone to help reorganize his pantry and teach him patience at checkers." Sam's smile bloomed slowly, then broadened into a grin that transformed his entire face. "Is that so? And has this rancher mentioned what he's offering in return?" Delilah pretended to consider. "Well, he did buy me some very nice blue fabric and a copy of Jane Eyre. But I think I'll need more details before I formally accept." Sam turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "In that case, let me be specific. I'm offering a life that won't be easy but will never be dull. Days of hard work and nights of restful companionship. A home that needs a woman's touch and a man who needs." He hesitated, then continued with quiet intensity. "A man who needs you, Delilah Hayes, more than I thought possible after knowing you such a short time." Tears pricked at Delilah's eyes again, but they were tears of happiness. "When you put it that way, Mr. Kincaid, how could I possibly refuse?" Sam pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Is that a yes?" he murmured against her hair. "It's a yes," Delilah confirmed, tilting her face up to his. "But I still need to tell my aunt in person. She's the only family I have left." "Of course," Sam agreed immediately. "We'll ride to Green Valley together once your wagon is repaired. I'd like to meet this aunt of yours, explain my intentions properly." He looked suddenly uncertain. "Unless you'd prefer to speak with her alone first." Delilah considered this. "No, I think it's better if we go together. She'll want to meet the man who's stealing away her assistant before she's even had a day's work from her." Sam chuckled, then grew serious again. "And after Green Valley, you'll come back to the Double K?" "Yes," Delilah said simply. "I'll come back." Their kiss beneath the stars sealed the promise, a beginning rather than an ending. The next day, Frank pronounced the wagon fully repaired and roadworthy. "Good as new," he declared proudly. "Better, even. That new axle's seasoned oak, stronger than the original." Preparations were made for the journey to Green Valley, which would take 2 days. Martha packed enough food for 4 people, insisting that Sam take one of the ranch hands along as an extra pair of eyes on the trail. "No sense taking chances," she said firmly. "Not with the future Mrs. Kincaid." Delilah blushed at the title, though she and Sam had not explicitly discussed marriage. It seemed understood between them that was where they were heading, but neither had rushed to formalize it. They had time now, time to be sure, time to plan, time to grow together. The journey to Green Valley was uneventful, the repaired wagon performing flawlessly. They arrived mid-afternoon on the second day, finding the small settlement much as Delilah had imagined from her aunt's letters, a tidy collection of wooden buildings along a main street, with homes scattered around the periphery. Delilah's aunt, Dorothy Hayes, lived in a small house behind her millinery shop. She was a slender woman in her 50s, with Delilah's auburn hair now liberally streaked with gray, and sharp blue eyes that assessed Sam thoroughly when Delilah introduced him. "So you're the cowboy who found my niece beside her broken wagon," Dorothy said, gesturing for them to sit in her small parlor. "And now you've come to tell me you're keeping her, I suppose?" Sam straightened in his chair. "If she'll have me, yes, madam, but the decision is entirely hers." Dorothy's gaze softened slightly. "Well, at least you've got that much sense." She turned to Delilah. "And you, my girl, is this what you want, to be a rancher's wife instead of a milliner's assistant?" Delilah met her aunt's eyes steadily. "It is, Aunt Dorothy. I know it seems sudden, but I've never been more certain of anything." Dorothy studied her niece for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I can see that. You've got the same look your mother had when she told our parents she was marrying your father and moving to Missouri." She sighed, then smiled unexpectedly. "Well, I can't say I'm not disappointed to lose my assistant, but I can hardly stand in the way of that kind of certainty." Relief washed over Delilah. "Thank you for understanding." "Oh, I understand all right," Dorothy said with a twinkle in her eye. "Just looking at the two of you is enough to see what's what. But," she added, turning a stern gaze on Sam, "I expect you to treat her right, Mr. Kincaid. She's the only family I have left." "Yes, madam," Sam replied solemnly. "I give you my word." Dorothy seemed satisfied with this. "Good. Now, how long can you stay?" "I'd like some time with my niece before you whisk her away to your ranch." They agreed to stay 3 days in Green Valley, giving Delilah time to get to know the town that might have been her home and to spend time with her aunt. Dorothy, despite her initial reservations, warmed to Sam quickly, especially after he fixed her leaking roof and stubborn front door without being asked. On their last evening in town, as they sat on Dorothy's small porch after dinner, Sam cleared his throat nervously. "I've been wanting to do this properly," he said, reaching into his pocket. He produced a small velvet pouch and emptied its contents into his palm, a gold ring with a modest but lovely pearl in its center. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice roughening with emotion. "I've carried it with me since I lost her. I always thought I'd know when it was right to pass it on." He took Delilah's hand gently. "Delilah Hayes, I know our time together has been brief, but I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Delilah's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Samuel Kincaid, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Dorothy dabbed at her own eyes with a handkerchief. "Well," she said briskly, trying to hide her emotion, "I suppose I'll need to start planning a trip to the Double K for a wedding." They left Green Valley the next morning, Delilah's wagon now filled not just with her original possessions, but also with wedding gifts from her Aunt Linens, dishes, and a beautiful quilt Dorothy had been saving for her hope chest. The return journey to the Double K seemed to pass in a happy blur, with Sam riding alongside the wagon rather than ahead, unwilling to be separated from his fiancée, even by a few yards. When they arrived back at the ranch, Martha greeted them with knowing looks at Delilah's ringed hand, but said only, "Welcome home, both of you," words that filled Delilah with warmth. The weeks that followed were busy ones, as Delilah settled into life at the Double K and preparations were made for a wedding. They decided on a date in late September, when the worst heat of summer would be past, but before the unpredictable weather of fall set in. Dorothy arrived a week before the ceremony, immediately taking charge of various details that neither Delilah nor Martha had considered. The minister from Carson's Crossing agreed to perform the ceremony, and neighbors from ranches miles around promised to attend, eager for any social gathering that broke the routine of ranch life. The day before the wedding, Sam took Delilah for one last ride as an unmarried couple, returning to the North Ridge where he had first asked her to stay. The view was as magnificent as ever, but Delilah found herself watching Sam more than the landscape, marveling at how thoroughly this man had changed her life in such a short time. "Any regrets?" Sam asked, catching her gaze. "Not one," Delilah replied truthfully. "You?" Sam shook his head. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the September sky an unblemished blue. The ceremony was held on the ranch, with guests gathered in the yard and the house decorated with wildflowers and ribbons by Martha and Dorothy's capable hands. Delilah wore a new dress of ivory satin that Dorothy had secretly ordered from Tucson, and Sam looked handsome in a new black suit that made his green eyes seem even more vivid. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Sam kissed her with tender reverence, Delilah felt a sense of rightness, of coming home, that transcended the newness of the Double K or the brevity of their courtship. This was where she belonged with this man in this place. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music provided by a fiddler from a neighboring ranch and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. When the last visitor had departed and the household finally retired, Sam led Delilah not to her small room but to the master bedroom, which had been transformed with fresh paint, new curtains, and the quilt from Dorothy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kincaid," he said softly, closing the door behind them. In the years that followed, Delilah often thought back to that desperate day beside her broken wagon, marveling at how the worst moment of her journey west had led to the best decision of her life. The Double K prospered under their joint care, expanding both in acreage and in reputation. Delilah did eventually open a small school on the ranch, teaching not only the children of their ranch hands but also those from neighboring properties. Their own family grew as well, first with the birth of a son, Benjamin, followed 2 years later by twin daughters, Sarah and Elizabeth. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk and developing the same love for the land that their parents shared. Dorothy visited regularly, spoiling her grandnieces and nephews shamelessly, before returning to her millinery shop in Green Valley, which continued to prosper under her expert management. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Sam surprised Delilah by taking her back to the spot where they'd first met, the place on the trail where her wagon had broken down. A small stone marker now stood there, inscribed with the words "Where our journey began." As they stood together beside the marker, Sam's arm around her waist and the Arizona sun warm on their faces, Delilah thought of all the twists and turns that had led them to this moment: the loss of her parents, the broken wagon, the chance encounter with a kind-hearted cowboy. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, leaning her head against his shoulder, "what would have happened if you'd taken a different trail that day? If we'd never met?" Sam was quiet for a moment, considering. "I've come to believe some things are meant to be, no matter what path we take," he said finally. "I think we would have found each other somehow, somewhere." Delilah smiled, turning in his arms to face him. "Samuel Kincaid, after all these years, you can still say the most perfect things." "Only to you," he replied, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness he'd shown on their wedding day. "Always to you." As they rode back to the Double K to their home, their children, their life together, Delilah silently thanked the broken wagon that had once seemed like the end of her hopes, but had instead become the beginning of her greatest happiness.